Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to my attempt at being a video essayist. This is a video I wanted to do for a while, and it might be a little bit longer, but it's just something I found really interesting throughout the series as I read it. So today I'm going to be talking about the best case of benevolent sexism in a book I've read. Now, obviously I'm not being like, woo, benevolent sexism, it's awesome. But as it is so poorly done so often in media in general, I wanted to point out when it was done well. So in general, in books especially, the isms of sexism, racism, and homophobia and the like tend to be painted in very broad strokes. It is very much everyone who believes this is bad, everyone who doesn't is good. Editing Margaret here. I just wanted to clarify real quick because I don't know how well that came across. I'm not saying that the isms are good things or that people who are overtly racist or sexist or homophobic are good people. I'm saying that it is possible to believe you are a good person or to even be seen as a good person and still have like latent isms in your mind, because everyone to a certain extent does. And I didn't want to make it look like that people who are heinously into the isms are good people, but it's much more multifaceted than there's people who have none of the isms who are good and people who have all of the isms that are bad. There's a lot more nuance to it than that, and I hope that makes sense. And it is very easy to flip from one side to the other, or else the entirety of sexism slash racism slash homophobia slash whatever other evils in this society can all be boiled down to the acts of one villain holding sway over everyone else. I like to refer to this as the Gaston effect. This idea that after Gaston is removed, the entirety of the town that wanted to kill the beast is just chill now. Although I guess you could also argue that it's part of the curse, but that's never explicitly stated. And in books, this is basically the same. A lot of ways where we have sexists, they're very blatantly evil. They speak in very blunt terms, all women are worthless or what have you. There's not really any subtlety or like microaggressions to it. It is very boldly stated in ways that even the most like grievous sexists today would not dream of stating for fear of looking like a giant sexist. And benevolent sexism struggles even more. So, quick overview if you don't know, benevolent sexism is basically the idea that women are these weak beings that should be taken care of. They should not be soldiers, they should not be doing dangerous things, they should keep to the sideline because they're dainty or whatever. This is even less covered in most books and is very quickly fixed in most books. So you usually have a character who is not necessarily evil, but sometimes kind of dumb, who has this mentality, and they're usually cured of it after seeing like one woman do one thing that's impressive. They'll see the one woman, usually our protagonist in the story, do something fantastical, and suddenly they're like, well, now I understand that all women are strong. And it's just not realistic. It doesn't happen like that. This idea that once men in general, or even the population in general, sees a woman being strong, they'll understand it doesn't happen. There have been strong women, strong female leaders doing fantastic things throughout the entirety of history. There have been female spies and soldiers and doctors and geniuses. And it's not a case of once one woman does it, the entirety of the gender is saved or is seen in a higher light. Most of the time, if that woman's story is even told in a broad sense, she is seen as this big exception. There have been many stories about leaders like Elizabeth I and Catherine the Great, and they're all painted either in a negative light to try to dim down what they did, or they're just held as being something extra. So today I'm going to talk about my favorite series of all time and the protagonist and his benevolent sexism and how fantastically I thought it was done. So the series in question, and I'm going to try to hold this up the right way, is the Shadow Campaign series by Django Wexler. And yes, I know I have all of the books in different formats and that bugs some people, but they stopped doing mass market paperbacks after the third one, and I'm cheap, but I still wanted them in physical. So, this is a 5-book flintlock series based on Napoleonic France, all about this army who originally, in the first book, is in this desert country called Kandar, which, yes, is the weakest book in this series because the Kandari are very loosely veiled references to Middle Eastern people, and they're not portrayed that fantastically. It is the series' biggest weakness, and thankfully, it does not go back to that land for the rest of the series. Books 2 through 5 are all done in what is essentially a European-esque land. Vorden is very obviously supposed to be France, with a lot of French ideals from that era. There is a pseudo-Catholic church that is very evil. It is just portrayed as the most evilest thing. Evilest? Is that a word? Whatever. So one of our main point of view protagonists is Marcus Devoir. He is, what is he in the beginning of the first one? Captain of the army. A lot of army positions change in this book. And he is our benevolent sexist of the story. But he is not meant to be a villain. Obviously, as a point of view character, we're meant to empathize with him on some level. But what is really well done with his background is it gives you multiple reasons for why he thinks the things he does. Obviously, the society around him has told him, hey, women should be, coddled and held back and what have you. But also, in his own personal life, Marcus reveals over the course of the story that he lost his family in a fire, including his 4-year-old sister named Ellie. And for him, that was a big point that he felt he should have protected her. This very little, very vulnerable little girl that was relying on him in a way died because he wasn't there. And so it gives him both a societal reason and a personal reason for these beliefs. But while it gives him reasons for this belief, it doesn't ever support them. And that's the brilliant part of this entire arc, is that throughout the narrative, without even having to say so bluntly, the narrative makes it very clear that it's not on board with his sexism. First of all, there's so many female characters from the second book onward. The first book, not too many because it's a bunch of army dudes in the desert. There's, I think, 4 or 5 tops named female characters. But even with 4 or 5 top named female characters, the big bad good versus evil battle at the end of the first book is done between 2 women. Marcus is just there watching. He can't do jack. It's between these 2 women. These ones are the ones with the powers that are duking it out. He's just kind of on the sidelines, sometimes helping. Now granted, he doesn't know that the one on his side is a woman, but that's just the point. Throughout the course of the story, you see an entire regiment of women come forward and are fantastic fighters. You see a princess that has her own strange abilities that is a fantastic fighter. And over and over again, more than just one female character coming up and saying, hey, I'm a strong woman, there's dozens. The big genius that has the entire financial market wrapped around her finger, a woman. There's an explosive expert that Marcus works with. There's who was essentially his right hand at one point in the series is a woman. And he just kind of has to go with it because once they're officially soldiers, he's too much of an army man to argue with that, even though he hates it. But you can see over the course of the story how things change for him. For example, there's one point where the regiment of all women soldiers, called colloquially the Girls' Own, are on the battlefield. And he doesn't even realize that they're on there until he sees their commander that he can recognize. And the whole point of that part is that in the heat of battle, a soldier is just a soldier. Regardless of their gender or their sex, a soldier just is. And it doesn't happen immediately, but over the course of the story, you can see him kind of realizing over and over again that this, women should be coddled and women should be kept safe is just flat out wrong. The woman that he spends the most time with is Racenia, who is a point of view character from the second book onward, and her essentially superpower via what they call a demon, or depending on your belief system in this world, could also just be a non-violent entity, basically keeps her indestructible. She can jump from a building, go splat on the ground, and she can heal herself and come back from it. This also keeps her from aging, which also, brings up some other struggles with, trying to keep things secret, but she is an insanely strong character, physically invulnerable, the most physically invulnerable of every character in this series, and also is very key in like hidden politics, even behind the "I'm just a princess" facade. And Marcus sees that. Racenia is like, "No, I got this. Like, you step aside. I'm the political one. I got the know-how. I've been studying this. I got this." And he sees over and over again, there are times when he actually has to step back and let her be impaled, essentially, because she's the only one that's going to survive it. And it grinds on him. He hates it. There's one point where I believe it is book... Which one are we at? Is it book 3? It might be book 3, where he tries to save a female character and it screws everything up. Someone else had a plan and it was going well, and he's like, "Oh no, woman in danger, I must save her," and he screws it up. And it kind of goes to show that, no, you're not helpful trying to coddle half of the population. And this book does not coddle the female population either. Women die just as much in battle as any of the male characters, and it works. Like, it shows that they are strong enough to deal with the horrors of this and keep going. And by the end of the book series, I don't know that I would say he is like perfectly on board with the girl power, but he is infinitely farther than where he was before. But there is one thing that just proves it, that I love as a narrative framing device, that is such a subtle way of showing that his benevolent sexism is stupid, and that is through the character of Winter Earenglass. I could do an entire deep dive into Winter Earenglass because she is one of my favorite protagonists of all times. She is the war lesbian I wish I was. But for the majority of the story, like 90% of the story, she is undercover as a man. This is mostly in the beginning because women can't join the army, and she needed to get away from some stuff I'm going to try not to spoil. So she disguises herself as a man and joins the army out of necessity, but after joining, realizes she's got a real knack for it. And within next to no time, she's rising through the ranks. She's impressing everyone with her courage and her bravery and her commitment to what they're doing and her military strategy genius. Like, it takes nothing for her to go up through. But Marcus is the last person in the entire series to realize that Earenglass is not a man. It becomes something of an open secret pretty much from like book 3 onward to the majority of the characters that Winter is a woman in disguise. Every member of the Girls' Own knows, and they love her for being their leader, so they're not going to say anything. Most of the other really big protagonist characters, with like 1 or 2 exceptions, and they're not that like main line of the plot, so it's fine, knows the secret. It's Racenia knows at one point, like everyone's like, yeah, totally, Winter's a woman. He's oblivious the entire time until like the last 100 pages of the final book, oblivious. And one of my favorite moments of all time comes in book 2, where for plot purposes, Winter is undercover as a woman. She had to dress as a woman to infiltrate a thing. And they actually end up crossing paths while she is dressed as a woman. She's wearing a wig that is, because she cut her hair to be a man, she's dressed in a dress, like everything says woman. And there's this really fantastic moment that is one of my favorite moments of the entire series, when like they're like a siege of a place and it's going down and how we're gonna win this. But they cross paths. And Winter is really paranoid because she was flat out told by another character to not let Marcus know that she was a woman. She was flat out told that if he knows, he will try to pull you back from battle. He will try to keep you from doing the thing you need to do. And she is a major, like, Deus Max. And she is a major character. She is, like, the solution to a big thing over the course of the story. So she can't have a man trying to pull her back and keep her safe. She needs to be in the dangerous situations. So she comes across him dressed as a woman, and she's paranoid. And he looks at her and goes, "Is that you, Earenglass?" And I'm paraphrasing, but her general reaction is, "Oh shit." And she goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Wow, you almost had me fooled. I would have sworn you were a woman." And then he just goes on. And it's Oh, it made me laugh because he sees her in a wig, long hair, dressed as a woman, still thinks it's a man masquerading as a woman. He never actually figures it out on his own either. Up to the 5th book, when she is in an army jacket, uniform that is tailored to show that she's a woman with her own naturally grown out hair, she still has to tell him flat out that she is a woman. And it is my favorite on-running joke of the entire series. The fact that the idea of a woman going into danger and being such a brilliant strategist in military battle strategy was so foreign to him that he could see a woman dressed as a woman, obviously as a woman, and it did not compute. And that's what I mean when I say things like the narrative supporting or not supporting what a character says or does. Because while the character had these beliefs of women should be coddled and women should be protected, the narrative did not support him at all. He was the butt of jokes because of this. The sheer number of times over the course of the story, he talks about Winter in a male way or refers to her in that way, and like other characters just like give each other like knowing looks or smirks, and he totally doesn't notice. The book says every step of the way this guy thinks is wrong, and he's going to change. But he's also never the villain over the course of the story. He lets the girl's own form. He doesn't try to he doesn't order them away from battle at any time, although that has more to do with the fact that he is very loyal to the army more than he's wanting this to go through. And yes, over the course of the story, some characters do flat out say to him, Rastini especially, hey, I can do this, don't try to hold me back just because I'm a woman. But by that point, the process has already been started. And in general, just the idea that you could have an ism shown in a realistic way where both society and their own personal backstory has supported these ideals. And in their mind, in Marcus's mind, they're the right thing to think. Like, he doesn't think to himself, oh, I'm a sexist. He thinks that this is what he should be doing. And rather than having one female character do one impressive thing and him being like, oh, well, my entire worldview has changed, he has shown over and over and over again that, yes, the women of this world can get shit done. And who do they get shit done? I don't think this is a character that would ever totally be 100% girl power by the end, but he has at least learned that he needs to step back, that he cannot hold another person back because they are a woman, that he needs to let them be the badasses that they can be. So that was my very long-winded way of saying that I love this series so much, and I know it's not well talked about on BookTube. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 people that have read anything of this series, and one of them DNF'd it after 50 pages. So I know this isn't a very beloved series, and it probably won't be even after this video, but just that idea of covering one of the isms in such a realistic way and showing it in a character while also showing that it is not supported by the author, and also war lesbians. There's multiple. Did I mention that? There's multiple war lesbians over the course of this story. Like, Winter has multiple female lovers, and there's other lesbians or sapphic women that she doesn't date. Like, it's awesome. So many badass lesbians. I'm into it. But regardless, I would love to see this kind of representation in books moving forward, that we can tackle the isms, tackle things like latent racism that doesn't necessarily make you a horrible person, but is still something you need to recognize and work to change. So if you have any of those recommendations of isms that are tackled very realistically, that are shown through a redemption arc of the person realizing it in real time, that are not just broad strokes of they were bad and now they are good and now it is fixed immediately, I would love to hear them. I am always looking for more recommendations like that. But in general, I just also wanted to talk about this series for a while. So thank you so much for sitting through my rambles. I don't know that I'll be doing a lot more videos like this in the future, but Indie April is coming up and I have so much stuff prepared for that. So please stay tuned. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.